Hello all. So we are here to discuss a very important topic for our Southern California, LA and Riverside County region, data challenges and opportunities to achieve our digital equity. This is Jagjit Dhaliwal. I'm going to moderate the session. We have an awesome panel here. So quickly introducing myself, actually I have just joined UiPath last week as a VP IT, assisting CIOs in their automation journey. So prior to that, actually, I worked as a deputy CIO at County of Los Angeles, where I led the digital divide effort and worked with all of our three panelists very closely in this effort. So we'll have this awesome panel sharing their insights, how they are actually achieving digital equity in the Southern California region. So we'll do the quick introductions. Maybe Jeanne, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to DataCon LA. My name is Jeanne Holm. I'm the Deputy Mayor at the City of Los Angeles for Budget and Innovation. And I've been working in this area for a very long time. Before this, I was with the World Bank doing similar work in laying infrastructure and providing internet access in Sierra Leone and Central and Sub-Saharan Africa. And in fact, I spent 32 years at NASA, part of which was working on the interplanetary internet.
Okay, Tom, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and excited to be here today. My name is Tom Mullen. I'm with the County of Riverside, Chief Data Officer, and I've had the opportunity to work in this space for several years, working on broadband services, working on digital equity, digital inclusion programs, connecting with our communities, working internally to do what we do better for you and our communities. Excited about the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and really how you can get involved.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. And Steve?
And hello, I'm Steve Steinberg. I am the Geographic Information Officer for the County of Los Angeles. I've been with the county around 3 years now and been very involved, as Jagjit mentioned, on our initiatives around digital divide. Prior to that, I spent the first half of my career on faculty at Humboldt State University. And when I got into digital divide, found it interesting because I did a project on rural broadband about almost 20 years ago when 100 megabits was considered high speed. And we were looking at ways to identify and assess the rural broadband at that time. So here we are years later doing faster version of the same.
And Steve, I know you said it in a funny way, but it's an unfortunate situation. There are many households in our community who doesn't even have that privilege itself today. And that brings up the topic of a digital equity, that how we can ensure that we provide the broadband access to each and every household, irrespective of their status, their race, their location within our community. And digital equity is a big concern for our board office across our different leadership. And this problem was there for a while. It's just that due to COVID, this problem got aggravated a lot and got high attention. And since last year, all our cities and counties have been aggressively working to address the digital equity. And specifically talking about LA County, where I got a chance to work closely with the county departments as well as city to develop the regional strategy for the digital divide. Because one of the things which we realized is we are a humongous county with 88 cities and we have 40 plus departments within the county. So there were so many disparate efforts were going on. And that's where board office decided that they'll ask the office of CIO to take a lead and then consolidate all the efforts which are going on within the county and then proactively establish partnership with cities, academia, venture capital, entrepreneurs, nonprofit and community-based organizations so that we have a comprehensive approach to solve this problem. So that's how we are approaching it from a top-down perspective. And I know on the ground level, all three of you are doing a tremendous work to address the issue of digital equity. And I know, Steve, within the county, each of our departments are approaching it differently based on their needs. I know as a part of internal services department, you are very closely involved with ISD leadership. Maybe if you want to share some of the examples, how we are approaching internally on the ground to address these issues.
Sure, and I'd like to address sort of two prongs of that question that you put forward. First, of course, there's the infrastructure component, and at the county, a lot of the infrastructure component is scattered across multiple departments. But as the GIO for the county, all of that data either is or needs to be mapped. So I was early on contacted, I think, by 3 or 4 different groups asking me for the same map, Jagjit being one. Where do we need internet? Where is it missing? So getting into that question was very interesting because it raised points we'll talk to later about, what we understand about data and information on the digital divide. But at a base level, what we're trying to do is look at opportunities to build out infrastructure in places where it's most needed to serve unserved communities in need. And from a county perspective, that was doing some infrastructure things like building out extra Wi-Fi antennas at county facilities, libraries, parks, community centers, and so on that were near these communities in need. So if we can't get high-speed internet to the home, at least we can put it near the home so kids can go to school and people can get online to do their business that they need to do. That was sort of the near-term solution as we were facing the early stages of COVID and recognizing the digital divide issues. But more comprehensively over time, we're looking at how do we build out something more sustainable in the long term. And that does get to household access, not simply go to a nearby park and log in there. The other prong of this that our department's really focused on is an initiative called Delete the Divide. And the idea there is it's one thing to give people the internet. It's another thing for people who have never had the internet to know what to do with it or how it can be useful. So we have a secondary parallel process in Delete the Divide, which is working on programs that'll roll out a little bit later this fall, both to train kids and students about careers and opportunities where the internet influences your ability to get into that. And it doesn't have to be an IT job. It may be, I can use the internet to learn how to do design. I'm into creative design. I want to design shoes for a shoe company or cars for an auto company. And everything's internet based these days. The software, the tools, the marketing. We have another parallel track that's not just for students and teachers who may be teaching them in the schools, but also for small business entrepreneurs. How do I get my small local business connected, build a website, do market analysis? A lot of that comes out of various prongs. So there are IT like programming and databases and that, but also just the value of the internet to the public, because it is a chicken and the egg issue where if I don't have internet and I suddenly get it, it's no use to me if I don't know how it's useful at my home. And if there's some cost involved or learning involved, I have to see value in spending that time or money to get up to speed with the internet. So I think that I'm very excited to be able to be involved with both of those, because it's both getting the infrastructure there, but also showing the value and educating people on how to use it once they have it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad, Steve, actually you brought up that point, because it is not only about internet. Because if we look at our overall strategic goals, it is internet, it is device, and it is a literacy. It's the whole package which we need to enable for our community. And I know, Jeanne, you are actually doing various ground efforts on these areas across all these 3 towers. Anything you would like to add from city perspective?
Sure. So I think there's a few pieces. We roll most of our stuff under a program called Get Connected Los Angeles, getconnectedlosangeles.lacity.org. And what this does is it helps us combine the public facing aspects of the program so people are able to easily find integrated services from our telecom partners, from the city, from everyone from human IT, from a variety of places that either give them free or low cost devices and free or low cost internet, broadband or Wi-Fi. And we also integrate that with our 311 call center, because ironically, think about it, if you're not connected, then how are you going to the website? But I just want to echo up what Steve said, is that there's really those 3 aspects of connectivity, accessibility, and literacy. So we've been working really hard around lately around the governance, which is putting together our Connectivity and Digital Inclusion Working Group, which has been in existence for about 5 years. It's internal facing, looking at how we streamline the internal processes for helping the telecom companies actually build out faster, because we're not going to do this all by ourselves. So that LA is one of the few areas where we can get internet at some space in every place. We also have formed last year during the pandemic a telecommunications and digital equity working group forum. And that's a public facing one with all of our telecom and infrastructure providers. We meet every month to talk about permitting issues, what they're doing around the digital divide, new programs, how they're supporting LAUSD and that kind of thing. And Jagjit, as you well know, we participate with other regional activities like the county's leadership, amazing leadership around regional strategies around broadband and the digital divide, the LA deal, which is led by LAEDC. And then we work really closely with LAUSD and the CIO's office, as well as the superintendent's office there. And so we do that from a governance perspective. On the city council and the mayor put forward $15 million this year. And we also got an additional funding around a community block grant to be able to really lift up some of that build out of infrastructure across the city in a big way that's going to be able to provision public Wi-Fi in key areas, and also to augment programs that we have around the accessibility, which is having a device in your hands, which is our Angelino Connectivity Trust. With T-Mobile, we distributed 18,000 Wi-Fi hotspots to homeless and foster care students who were just falling outside the connection range for LAUSD. We're augmenting our Tech to Go program, where you can check out computers at the library and take them home. Our Cycle LA program, which is actually a giveaway program. We give away devices and computers. And then we also, working with Starry Internet, provided during the worst of the pandemic and continuing to do so, free broadband, high-speed broadband in our public housing. And all of that is also connected to the fact, I think Steve talked about, like, how are we helping not have this as a generational issue? So just this month, we launched our new Angelino Corps, which is 400 kids that are young people from junior college age that are going to be working in community service. Think of it like a Peace Corps for LA. And 100 of them are our future core kids. And these are kids who are working to close the digital divide in senior centers, at parks, at our libraries, at community centers, with groups like Human IT and 9 Dots and the cyber seniors, so that we can actually have folks in the community supporting the community to close the digital divide.
Yeah, no, this is awesome, and Jeanne, really appreciate the work you are doing in the city. And Tom, I know we are a neighboring country, and there are similarities, but there are differences too when we look at a diverse population and in terms of the geographical spread. So I'd love to hear your thoughts process that how you are approaching it. Any differences, anything key which you'd like to highlight from Riverside County perspective?
Certainly, and it mirrors much of what you just heard. As we all look at connectivity, we look at education, we look at devices, we're looking at how do we close that divide. And on a county scale here in Riverside, we've had the opportunity to work across not just our internal departments, but some of the cities, our local nonprofits, our educational institutions, the unified school districts, really to similarly implement a digital equity program. And about 5 years ago, the county made a concerted effort and made a change to take all of our surplus IT equipment that we generate every year, and it's a lot. We've got 22,000 employees, smaller than both the city and county of Los Angeles, but still a significant number of devices that we generate a year. And we've rolled them into a program that we repurpose that. We donate that out to nonprofit organizations that serve the residents of Riverside County. And those organizations really are run the gamut from kids to seniors to families to veterans to those in need across all spectrums. And we did that as the device component. And then we partnered with the school districts on the educational component. And what we found, surprisingly, or not really, is that the schools are teaching the kids, and the kids have a level of knowledge and ability and comfort with the internet, but their parents might not. Their grandparents might not. Those that are in the home with them might not. And they may not have the devices that they need outside of a cell phone. And so having those parents and uncles and grandmothers and older siblings get the education they need through a digital literacy program that are provided by the school districts. We then donate the computer to them on the other side of that program. And then we try to connect them to the low-cost broadband services that are available by our primary carriers throughout Riverside County. Charter Spectrum, AT&T, and Frontier all have low-cost programs here throughout Riverside County. And so we try to put that package together so that we can connect and make a difference, just as we all do, one family at a time. And then more broadly, we look at continuing to work with our cities and the nonprofits, not just to identify the gaps that exist, but then what additional programs are always ongoing. Because it really is a big community effort that we all are engaged in to service those that we work with and those that we're here to help. One of the great missions that local government gets to fill is really working with our communities. And that connection is about working not just inside government, but really it is out there in the community and leveraging the multiplier effects that we all see time and time again through the nonprofits that we engage with. And so to the extent that we can help support them, connecting them with information, connecting them with people, connecting them with the services that are vast throughout the county, all the counties throughout the region, we all move the ball forward and one life at a time begin to close that gap. So that's what I really find exciting about working in this space. So many times in government, it's about the widget, and it's about the service, and it's about the internal services from an IT perspective of what we do. So I get excited about being able to engage outside the organization and really see the value of what happens. And it's not just us, it's all the service teams and all of the nonprofits that are doing the good work. And we're just there to help support it. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah. No, Tom, great to hear that all our counties are actually working in all the packaged solutions. So it's not only internet. And second thing which I really gathered is it is about equity and sustainability, because it is not about just putting us short-term solutions, but keeping a long-term eye on it, that how we can solve this problem to the core of the problem, and then develop that long-term strategies around it. And really glad that all our counties, especially in SoCal, we are coming together. But in order to make this successful, I mean, one of the big challenge which Steve and I was always facing in the county was the data. Because it is about what problem we are solving and how we can quantify this problem. What's our current baseline? And as we are launching new initiatives, how much progress we are making and how far we are from a target state, and how we actually can quantify it so that our leadership can actually get a good sense of the gravity of the problem and the progress we are making. And I know you and I were involved in various regional associations. We were able to gather data sets from there. So maybe if you want to touch upon that, what kind of data sets which you are very much interested in and which we are able to gather, and what type of data sets you are not able to gather so far?
That's a great question, because there is data that we can't get to, but there is an awful lot of data that we can. And so as we begin to break down really the three segments that we talk about, that education, the devices, and then the access to broadband, we have pretty good insight on, I think, the device side. We have programs that routinely are connecting with citizens that are working throughout the community through many of the social service programs that cities and the counties administer, and we're collecting data all the time on that. And we can leverage some of that internal local data and connect it with state and federal data that we're seeing on socioeconomic indicators that we've utilized for other program and program measurement and insight generation. The education component, we work and try to understand from the educators what they're seeing. And they share what they can with us. They do a good job of anonymizing that information, depersonalizing it so that it's put in a package in a format that we can at least get insight and make some decision on, but without breaking that confidentiality that they have on privacy. And that's important. And then really the third piece is around the broadband. And that is an area that we struggle with most from a data perspective. There are maps that are generated by the federal government through the FCC. maps that are generated by the California Public Utilities Commission, who is the regulatory authority here in California for broadband services, on where underserved communities are and where areas that are not served. So it's a map that is created based on federal data, but it's an inaccurate map because it's not generated from the level of data that we need. And the level of data that I believe we need on the broadband side, and let me just pause for a second. This is something that we've been working on regionally, as you mentioned, to try and get to this level of granularity. I believe we really need address level broadband data. We need to know by address, is it served by a service provider? What's the level of service that's currently being provided? What is the cost for that service? And then from that data, you can determine what's occurring at a particular house. So are they served? Are they not served? Are they underserved by whatever metric we think is an appropriate metric? 25 meg, 100 meg, 1 gigabit, whatever it is, today or tomorrow. But now you know by address what's occurring. And from that, you can make decisions on where do we allocate our resources, our funding, and our efforts to get service to that location, either new service or improve the level of service to close that gap and access to broadband. And it's that information that we need from the ISPs. And it's that information that is needed, not just here in Riverside, not just here in Southern California, but it really is throughout the nation that we need that level of data so that good decisions can be made, so that we're providing the funds where it's needed most throughout our communities and the communities across the nation. So it's that information that I continue to encourage everyone to ask for. Ask for it again, and encourage everyone to focus on asking for that ISP level, address level broadband service that's being provided and where it isn't.
Right. No, Tom, fully agree. I completely understand. We were part of several conversations where we are trying to get the household data, and relying only on a top-down data is only bringing approximation. And I know, Jeanne, you are involved in various conversations with ISPs as well as other associations. From a city perspective, are there any other data sets you would like to highlight which you have access to or which you are gathering to get a sense of digital equity in your region?
Well, I want what Tom's getting. So if Tom can get that data, that's exactly what we need to. So the FCC data, so I'll start with the kind of what Tom had referenced and then what the city's also doing. So the FCC data is problematic, not in that we need to know where AT&T is versus Verizon, for example, but we do need to know that there is a small cell and it is reaching a certain number of households and how many households subscribe at what cost. Because affordability is a huge issue in some of our communities. And so what may be true in West LA for affordability is completely not true in South LA. And so we want to make sure that we're understanding where the need is, not again to, like try to oversee the process by which companies are pricing, so much as being able to see where we need to provision services. Or this year, we're going to be building out free public Wi-Fi in certain locations. It's helpful to us to know where people are, where it's undersubscribed. And right now, the FCC data does it at a block level. So if one household in that block, one household in an entire city block, and think about how many apartment complexes that could include, has internet access, then they all have internet access. And that is simply ridiculous. So disaggregated data is important. We understand the issues around proprietary data for the telecommunication companies, but at the same time, I don't feel that some of this is proprietary. And so we have these conversations, which are always comfortable, with all of our telecommunication companies, and they're with each other too. So it's actually a great forum. Everybody's very good about sharing. And I just have to say, every one of them has stepped up in big ways during the pandemic to help get people connected. So although we chide each other, it's they're doing the important work because their success is our success. If they can't get people connected, we need to do everything to streamline our as much as possible. We also combine this with other data though. So if you look at data data.lacity.org, which is our open data portal, data.lacity.org, you'll see at the top a digital broadband map. And that map combines a bunch of different data. And that data looks at issues around where library locations are, because we provide and broadcast free Wi-Fi in and around our libraries. Jagjit, we point to a bunch of county resources that where you provision, oh, sorry, you previously provisioned free Wi-Fi, and Steve currently does. And at some of our parks, we do that too. And so it shows where you can access free internet. It combines other aspects. And at the bottom, you can pick and choose what you want to combine. So you can make your own digital divide map or digital inclusion map and kind of look at your neighborhood or the things that you think are important about that. Literally, it's just click here, and it combines two maps, which is a handy little way of helping people learn about data. The other thing we're also doing, though, is we do overlays of poverty, of population density, because again, sometimes there might be a small cell or even a large antenna, but if it's a very dense population area, then often the capacity becomes an issue. So we're also interested in capacity. And we also have a regulatory aspect of the city that we oversee when there are accelerated complaints about providers, then we sometimes get involved. And that's important because, for example, we found that at our public housing, there was I won't say who, there was an internet service provider that was providing the service, but for a variety of reasons, it was not working at all for anybody. And so Starry Internet came in with a different technology and provided the service, and it's been a huge success. So just knowing that there's somebody subscribed or that this service is available does not also mean that the service is adequate or even that the service is accessible to people, even if they can afford it. So I think that those are some of the things. And the last interesting piece of data that I think would be interesting is to learn about businesses working in the digital divide. So we've started a couple of ways to address this and trying to understand where the businesses are in Los Angeles. But we have a sense, and we can certainly see that there's not, other than the engineering infrastructure piece, there's not a lot of new entrants into the market. And we'd like to have more new entrants into the market. So we're also this year starting our South LA Vision Lab, which is going to be helping entrepreneurs, particularly from the hardest hit digital divided communities, to incubate their ideas with our LA Clean Tech Incubator amazing staff and be able to bring those ideas forward into viable businesses. So Human IT is a great example of a homegrown LA-based business that's now nationally recognized for their work across the digital divide. They started here, and it was a labor of love. And we don't want everybody to have to go through that labor. We want to bring venture capitalists to the table, people with good ideas, business mentors, and make sure that all of those good ideas get incubated.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up all these points, especially on our broadband, the similar challenges we were facing within the county also. But actually, not only broadband, when Steve and I were working on, we were really struggling even for the literacy data sets. And to some component, even the device usage, whether they have a device and that device is enough to support their needs. And I know, Steve, we had various conversations on those aspects. Maybe if you want to share how you were trying to get data and what type of data you are trying to gather, especially on a device and literacy components.
Sure. Before I do that, I want to reiterate a couple of points that both Tom and Jeanne made. I think, again, granularity of data as a mapping person, a GIS person, I'm thinking of this as a spatial problem. We have a large geography. We need to target resources in places. So understanding all of the infrastructure and access issues that my colleagues just alluded to, we need that address level data for sure. And just a quick story on that. I won't name any names, but one of the things we were trying to do was identify, because I kept being asked, well, what addresses have internet and what ones don't? And I said, we don't have that data, but the providers do. So we did some interactions with providers, and I think public-private partnerships are really important here, as Jeanne said too, is even though they may not, for competitive purposes, want to share that data of who their customers are, they know who they are. So there's opportunities to interact with saying, here's places we think are problematic, have low bandwidth or low subscription or uptake or whatever it may be. can you help us validate that? Can you help us know if that's true? Because they can look at residential addresses that are or are not subscribers. And as a county, we know all the addresses in the county. What we don't know is the connectivity of those addresses. But finding ways to pair that and not dilute it so much that we end up with something that's back to the FCC type data where it's, oh, one house has gigabit, so everyone has a gigabit. We know that's not true. The other thing I'll throw in there too is, you know, helping people get access. I didn't know we were supposed to do URLs, so find wifi.lacounty.gov is the site we put out there early on, which is still there. That is a countywide data space that you can go to, put in an address, and find all the Wi-Fi hotspots near you. That includes both public and private Wi-Fi that we're aware of. I know it's missing a huge number of potential hotspots, especially on the private sector side. We could scrape all the McDonald's and Starbucks and they all have Wi-Fi. We knew that, but what about all the other businesses that provide Wi-Fi and might be good access points? We put in all our parks and all of our libraries and all of our other things as well. That's an evolving process. And I think that's where public, private, nonprofit, and community partnerships really important, because we need help to know where the other information is. And we can help aggregate that at the county-wide level. So just a couple things there to bring up. As far as though this idea of understanding device types and level of knowledge and literacy around the internet, those are really social science factors. So we went to a couple of different places. Some are widely available, like the American Community Survey data from the Census Bureau. There are questions in the ACS data at the block or tract level that get to questions of, do you have internet at home? And what other kinds of access to the internet you have. Of course, ACS also has all the demographic data. So we know income and ethnicity and languages spoken and all these other factors, educational levels and so on, that are important additional information as we look at where to target, not just, again, connectivity and literacy, but also, is that a census block that is lower income and maybe the affordability is the driving factor? That's an assumption we have to make because we don't have information explicitly from the households at the address level to say these people don't subscribe to the internet because they can't afford it. But if they live in a low income census unit, we can at least make that assumption. I think, again, what's missing there is ACS data is nice, fairly granular data, but we don't have that local level data. That's where, again, community organizations or actually finding ways to get out and asks people. You're not going to do a full census of every household, but at least doing some on the ground validation and checking of, why are people not subscribing? Is it money? Is it literacy? Is it devices? You know, because the solutions to those problems will vary. So bringing that socioeconomic demographic data into the mix has really been valuable for us. The other piece, which is not free, but we have licensed through our provider, is data from Esri called the Business Analyst database. It's a whole bunch of marketing data is really what it is, but there's demographic information in there that goes beyond the census to actually get to specifically, do you own an Apple device or a PC type device? Do you own a certain type of phone or tablet? And then what do you use it for? And it gets to things like, do I just do email? Do I browse the web? Do I use certain kinds of software? Do I use graphic design software? Do I use engineering software? Do I use music software or video software? And again, it's not a perfect means to getting to literacy, but I can make some reasonable assumptions that somebody who only browses the internet and does email is at a different level of literacy or maybe understanding of opportunity than somebody who's using graphic design software on their computers, because you have to know more about how to use IT to get to those higher level sorts of applications. So by combining census data, business analyst data that we have from Esri, and infrastructure and access data that we have from these other sources, I think it's given us a little bit deeper picture of what's the distribution of needs and reasons for why people do or don't take advantage of or can't take advantage of access to the internet. So I think at the end of the day, it's really an all of the above solution in my mind. I mean, we need to keep pushing for more detailed granular data, but at the same time, I always like to think about what surrogate data, what data is close that we can make some reasonable assumptions from about why things are happening the way they are and where are they happening.
Jagjit, can I just jump in one more thing? Kind of, Steve just jogged my memory about something. So there's companies that also sell data that's helpful, like Ookla, that looks at speed test. And I know that we've been working, like I said, really closely with LA Unified School District to try to make sure we're all together helping to bridge that digital divide during the pandemic. But being able to also get a sense of the speed test has been super helpful. I mean, you're very device dependent. So if you're coming in with a hotspot, it's going to seem different, but generically it tends to average out. And so it would be nice if we didn't have to pay for all that data, but we still have some other data sources that we use from time to time, not so much like every day or subscribe to, but as we need to, that helps to understand as well.
No, absolutely, absolutely, Jeanne. And glad you brought that example, including Esri example by Steve. So I hope this give an opportunity to our audience to hear what kind of challenges we are facing and why this data is so important to us to have an accurate problem statement itself. Because otherwise it's so difficult for us to even measure the progress and the effort we are making and how to prioritize these efforts, in which neighborhood we should accelerate our programs and what type of programs we should accelerate. So I know we don't have a perfect data, and my colleagues actually talked about the challenges which we are facing around that data. And I know, Jeanne, you talked about some of the commercial options or approaches which can be used. And since our DataCon LA community is all data community, we have open source people, we have students, we have crowdsourcing people. Maybe if you want to share some of the approaches which we might have been already using to address these challenges, or are there any opportunities for external partners to work with us using our open data which we have and potentially bring us the insights and the challenges which we are facing from a bottom-top approaches? Maybe if some of the examples we have where we are already using or where potentially they can actually step in and help us. I think this is a great opportunity for our data community to come together and see how we can crowdsource this problem. Maybe Jeanne, you want to share some of your thoughts building onto the Ookla example?
Sure. Well, absolutely. So we didn't get here by ourselves. We're not going to get out of it by ourselves. This is it's a global issue. Actually, I was talking at a UN conference earlier today about this very subject, and we were talking about places in Africa and Asia and Europe that are all suffering the same sort of digital divide, and it's one which I think we really need. A lot of the people, a lot of us in DataCon. And those of you attending today, we were probably not the regular folks that we're trying to address. We're folks who tend to get connected, who feel that that's important, to put our resources to high-speed internet at our houses or work. But think about during this pandemic, how different things would be if you didn't have connectivity. You wouldn't know where to go for COVID testing. You wouldn't have the latest information on how to be safe. You wouldn't even know if you were sick potentially because you wouldn't have all the latest list of symptoms. I mean, think how often information has been updated. You wouldn't know where to go to get vaccinated. You wouldn't be able to order groceries delivered or pay for things online even. And so the difference between being connected and certainly not to work remotely or to go to school remotely. Our seniors have suffered a huge amount of social isolation during this time. And so if we think about the difference between being digitally connected and literate now versus somebody who isn't, that's been a matter of life and death for some people. And so I just want to make sure everybody understands the importance of what we're saying and the opportunity that you have to be part of the difference there. So we've talked about the challenges around data. It's not that the data isn't always accessible, it's just sometimes really messy or it has to be scraped. So there's like interesting data work to be done there. There's also work from our partners. And again, a huge shout out to all our telecommunications and digital equity forum partners, which includes everybody from Starry to Starlink, from Crown Castle to Dish, from Verizon to AT&T to T-Mobile. I know I'm forgetting a bunch, Spectrum, Frontier, Cox. And so all of you have been great about stepping up. If you're a service company like that, infrastructure, or others, or even a company working on digital literacy, we'd love to partner with you and include you in our conversations. And then also, and so we're also looking at the possibility of building out much more public Wi-Fi. We had an RFI that went out, request for information that went out last year. And then this year we'll be following up with those folks to think about how we partner on that. So that's a public-private partnership, probably. And the other thing is that I know each of you has an inner angel waiting to get out. And so we have a Data Angels project. Data Angels let anybody work with the city for 8-week sprints. It's just volunteer work, and you do it at your own pace, at your own time, and on a project that's particularly interesting to you. We have a bunch around the digital divide. And so if you want to unleash your inner angel, then please reach out to me and look at our data.lacity.org site to apply to be a data angel.
No, I completely agree and echo that sentiment of Data Angel. I know we were part of some of the hackathons which we arranged on those. So that's definitely a great opportunity for, especially for students and data evangelists in LA region. Please do contact Jeanne on that. And Tom, you want to share some of your thoughts on Riverside, any of the programs or different approaches which you are using to trying to make sense of the data, whatever data we have?
Yes, it follows many of the same patterns, and I particularly like your data angel idea. That's a good one. I think we may need to adopt something like that. So thank you for sharing that. That's a good one. One of the items I just wanted to touch on first, I think, is as we talk about broadband services and digital literacy. The folks in San Diego County City, particularly with their San Diego Association of Governments, have done quite a bit of work around pulling together the data on connectivity in their community, whether that's cellular, Wi-Fi, or broadband services for home and business. And they've included the providers, local businesses, as well as the community in these discussions and these data gathering efforts. And also by extension, the analysis that's going on around what does this data mean? How is this describing our community? What are we discovering as a result of this process? What insights are we discovering, really? And I have to give them credit because they're doing great work to help move the ball forward in their community. And it's been an example that we've looked to really throughout the rest of Southern California as we work throughout the Southern California Association of Government. It's a group called SCAG, and it's the membership of all the cities and the counties within Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, Imperial, San Diego, San Bernardino, and Ventura counties. It's a big region. It's a lot of people and a lot of discussion that occurs in that area. And we've all collectively been working on how do we better describe through data what's going on in our communities around digital literacy, broadband services, access, and then by extension, what are we discovering through that data that we can bring to bear to solve problems in our communities, and do it in some coordinated fashion without repeating and duplicating the same efforts again and again, which we all do a lot. But how do we do that together? And so that is a discussion that's ongoing today throughout the region. And so you're looking at all 26 million residents of Southern California across the two regions of San Diego, Los Angeles, and LA, and Riverside, and the like. How do we get to the information on where are we connected? What's that connection look like? Is that only cellular? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it satellite? And the like. And so I wanted to mention that because it's a bigger effort that's going on beyond what we've already shared. And that's a microcosm really of what's going on at the state level through actions that have taken place with issuance of significant dollars for broadband services throughout the state, as well as the discussion at the national level of infrastructure for broadband. I keep coming back to broadband because it's a key piece of infrastructure that's required to do a lot of the other things. It's one of the primary three enablers that we talk about, right? And so I focus back on that because it's what do we do? Do we build infrastructure? Do we provide resources, funding for adoption of that when it's available? Do we simply find the problem and say, gosh, how do we solve the problem? Whether we have the money to do it or someone else has the money to do it, how do we solve that problem? And it's that process that we are all working toward, and we are all a member of this community to try and solve it. So I just wanted to share that piece. I think that may have been a bit off of what you asked, but I thought it was important for folks to understand that there is something happening that's much, much bigger even than what we're talking about here.
No, it is. Tom, thanks you bring up this point, because within the county, we also felt the same. And we have so much of talent across our partners. And that is the reason actually, as a part of our digital equity regional team, we created the advisory group across these three towers, broadband, device, and literacy, in which we had all of our subject matter experts, nonprofit CBOs, partners, private academia. So whoever is doing whatsoever effort in this area, we have them as a part of our advisory team so that we can actually leverage their expertise and bring back these challenge statements in our brainstorming sessions with them. And if someone is doing a good work or a success in a particular area of LA County, how can we replicate it across other parts of our county? So we use those advisory team meetings to achieve that. And I know Steve mentioned about Delete the Divide program, in which they partner with, they are actually have enabled the marketplace where all the partners can come in actually and then provide those services, and they are gathering a lot of metrics around it. And lastly, what we did was to overcome that bottom top challenge. We actually reached out to our board of supervisors, and with the help of field deputies, we actually were able to identify top 3 to 5 neighborhoods in each of our district. And we use the ACS data of internet connectivity, as well as the income, as well as the demographics data to prioritize those neighborhoods. And now using those neighborhoods data, then now we are doing a pilot programs within that neighborhoods. To give an example, like LADC is actually running an assessment program for 2 of our vulnerable neighborhoods. And they are developing a survey framework on the ground where we're going to conduct the survey at a household level to get that on-ground intel that what type of services and programs which we should accelerate in which neighborhood. So we are hoping that the same survey framework and the assessment framework can be replicated across other 20 plus neighborhoods which are identified. So those are some of the ways we are trying to address the same data problem. And I know, Steve, you are pretty close to some of the partner discussions, apart from Ookla and Esri. Anything you would like to add?
Sure, I'm going to add a couple. And you mentioned again, Delete the Divide. That's deletethe.divide.org. And as Jagjit mentioned, that is the program around the literacy side, and we have a number of corporate partners and others involved to help with that outreach and training. Because again, if people have access to the internet but they don't know why they would want it, then there's no reason to subscribe. Of course, COVID forced that on a lot of families, and then we weren't ready for it. But I think from the provider side too, if you have communities that understand why they want broadband, now you have people who want to subscribe. So, it's a chicken and the egg problem. You don't know why you need internet until you have it, and you don't want to install internet as a provider until people need it and want it and are willing to pay for it, or there's programs that help them pay for it. So I think those bringing those pieces together is really important. And a lot of this, again, is, as my colleagues have said, public, private, community, nonprofit types of partnerships where we're not just sharing ideas and successes, we're also sharing data, and data analysis was brought up by somebody. I think one of our big untapped resources in many cases is leveraging the people who can help us do the data scraping and aggregation and analytics to really get into this, whether that's, people that are volunteering through things like the Data Angels and hackathons and those sorts of programs, or whether that's through partnerships with our local universities, which we have many of. And all of those, things together can be really important coordination. The other thing that I don't think anyone's actually mentioned, but I want to bring up on data challenges is the temporal problem. And what I mean by that is we want to improve the situation on all three prongs here, but we need a baseline. And we've discussed the issues about understanding the baseline status of our communities and access and infrastructure. But what we also need is temporal data that will be regularly and consistently connected. So it's one thing to say, oh, we can look at an FCC map or a census data set like ACS, but that stuff's only updated, if we're lucky, every few years, or every, the census is every decade. They do ACS in a rolling basis of 5 years. I don't personally think any of us would say, oh, we can do some stuff and then wait 5 or 10 years to see if it worked. This is a problem now that needs to be solved immediately, not 5 or 10 years out. As I alluded to when I introduced myself, I was doing studies on broadband access and connectivity 20 years ago. And when I was brought into these projects on the county side, I was at some level not surprised, but I was somewhat disappointed to learn that other than changing the definition of high-speed internet from 100 megabits to 100 to something faster, maybe 25 gigs or something like that, we haven't done much in 20 years. We've done a little bit incrementally. So I think having a way to actually baseline and then track in meaningful ways, having the data analytics and the understanding of, did we have success? What did putting infrastructure and literacy programs and devices into a community actually work? And if it didn't work, why? And if it did work, why? So we can replicate it. Those are huge parts of the data picture that are not about necessarily providing it initially, all those three prongs, but actually knowing, were we successful? And having the ability to do data-driven decision-making over time that really tracks and monitors that stuff. And I don't hear a lot of that discussion, and I understand it's secondary to getting the problem solved in the first place, but this is when we need to capture that data, because if we don't, we're going to miss our chance, and then we don't have anything to refer back to. So from a data analytics side, I know, again, a lot of you out there, this is your thing. You can help us with these things, organizing the data attributes and the data systems and the dashboards and the analytics to actually understand all of this. So I'll leave that as my parting comment.
Great points, Steve. And being a data evangelist, I know how passionate you are about data, and this was actually coming from your heart. I can tell you that. So we are close to an top of hours. So let's wrap up. Maybe any last words from each of you? Maybe Jeanne, any last word or any suggestions for our audience?
Sure. I'd just like to thank everybody for the work that you're doing. Steve and Tom and Jagjit for the work you've been doing. It's so important to get people connected. It really, truly, truly is. And, when we go into the communities and talk to folks and hear why they aren't connected, it's because $10 is the difference for, half a week's worth of food. And so even though we have some low cost options, that the affordability is a barrier. And as Steve's pointed out multiple times, the literacy is also a barrier. People need to know what they can do online. This week, we launched our Angelino Connect program with the mayor, which integrates 140 city services into a single sign-on. And this is great, and it's contactless, and it lets you do a lot of things, but that's only true if you're connected. So it's tied into banking and a few other things too. But the point is that, we often gloss over some of the things that are just hard to measure, hard to find, hard to connect. And because the data gets aggregated so badly, it becomes difficult for us to find where those very specific points are. So for those of you interested, our Data Angels program. For those of you who are working in the industry, God bless you. And just thanks to everybody here today.
Thanks, Jeanne. Tom, any last words from your side?
I think I'll just briefly say I encourage all of you to advocate for address level broadband data being collected either at the federal or state level. I think it's going to have to happen at the federal level. So I encourage you all to look into that and encourage all those around you to support that cause. It's needed and will help us all make better decisions and get the resources truly where they're needed.
Perfect. Well said. And Steve, any inspiring words? We have to attract a lot of data talent to the county.
Well, I think I'll echo what my colleagues have said. I think, all of us are passionate about addressing these issues and finding ways to do better. A lot of that is driven by quality data. Every one of us in IT knows garbage in, garbage out. If I don't have good data, I don't care how pretty the map I make is that says where I should go, or how pretty the analytics are that say I'm doing well or I'm doing poorly. They're meaningless if we don't have good data and good, and good ways to communicate. And I think, again, when I was brought into this, the decision makers, because it's not their area, they don't understand this. So I think another piece of the puzzle I'd advocate for is we need to educate our decision makers and our community, communities at large, not just about how to use the internet and how to get the internet and all that, but what all this stuff actually means. Because it's very easy to look at a pretty map or a pretty dashboard and think, oh, problem solved. And we know that those folks have a lot of other responsibilities. So as data analysts and data providers and the people doing the hard work with the data, finding ways to actually make those data meaningful to the people that need to understand what they mean is another piece of the puzzle. I think a lot of the visualizations and other tools that all of us work with can do more to support so that it's not just a big database, or worse yet, 100 Excel sheets that land on my desk and they say, oh, here's all this data, can you do something with it? So helping that piece of the puzzle too, so that we can actually be more efficient and timely in providing the data for data-driven decision making by those folks who need it.
Right. Absolutely. And I will add one more opportunity for our audience. We have a chief data officer position open at LA County. Fabulous role. I'm so glad that the hiring freeze is off now. So we were actually running our county without CDO role, and we were all of us were trying to step in and do that job. So Steve, I, Peter, and a few others have been doing that job, and now finally we have that role open. So we are really looking for talented people who come in and solve our data problems, with some of which you got a taste of it today. So I hope this is helpful for everyone to understand the gravity of the problem, why getting a data around the digital equity is difficult, and what kind of approaches we are trying to follow. And we need everyone's support in it. So if you have ideas, please reach out to one of us and see how best we can help each other, because all of us are in together, and this is a crowdsourcing effort. We cannot solve it ourselves. So really appreciate our panelists and my colleagues, and thanks again for giving us the opportunity to share our insights. Thank you all.